Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Airspeed's Korra Rewatch video. This one's going to be for K203 Civil Wars Part 1. And yeah, this is, I think, the beginning of some of the episodes that the fandom tends to really not like in Book 2. Because I think a lot of people do tend to give the Southern Lights sort of a pass because it's more heavily linked into the later stuff, which is, I think, more kind of well regarded by most of the fandom. These episodes tend to be where I think people take issue because it's more kind of character focused. Personally, I like both Civil Wars episodes, and I think they're actually really good episodes that link in kind of heavily to a lot of what I like in this book. And I feel that some of the problems in Book 2 more come in episode 5 and 6, which we'll get to. But with these episodes specifically, I like that, you know, the episodes are called Civil War with the S. It's not Civil War. So it's not just that these two episodes are meant to be about the North versus South. It's more referring to all the little wars, little battles going on, whether it be between family members and so on, or just between specific characters, those type of civil wars in a way. And that's what this episode covers. It's Tenzin and the issue with his siblings. Them searching for Iki is her issues with her siblings. We get Korra and her issue with her parents in this episode, and I suppose the beginning of some of the issues that she has with her uncle. Combined with the fact that always in the background we have sort of the development of Tonraq and Unalaq and how much they don't really like each other. But let's get into, I suppose, the side plot, which is the Tenzin stuff with Kaya and Bumi. And yeah, basically it kicks off because Iki has ran away because Jinora and Milo were teasing her, and, you know, basically Tenzin and his siblings go out to search for her. And this brings up, I suppose, issues from their past, and basically the first hints about what the, I suppose, Katang family dynamic was like. And it's where I feel some people, when they view aspects of Book 2, only give it a very basic surface level analysis of, as is presented here, you listen to Kaya and Bumi, you immediately think Aang is like a bad father, he neglected them and only focused on Tenzin. Whereas I think when you take in the context of what's really happening here, that the focus is on Kaya and Bumi, and them bringing up stuff from the past, years and years ago at this point. They're talking about basically 40 plus years ago, more or less, or something like that. And what you really see is that their relationship turns from being basically all of them being in their 50s and above, to almost them acting like kids, because they're bringing up these events from the past, Dad didn't bring me in all these field trips with you and so on, you got more attention when you were younger. When I think just the fact that they're all here now, and they for the most part can get on outside of just directly addressing these issues, shows that clearly it wasn't so bad, because it's not like you all have terrible lives. You had these issues and they eventually got you to that point in your lives where Kaya's a respected, healer, kind of spiritualist. I think we more or less get that it is an aspect of that as well. She traveled the world a lot, and Bumi obviously became a pretty high up commander in the United Forces, and Tenzin, of course, successfully, had a family and is bringing the airbender culture back and so on. So the family ended up kind of working out fairly okay, and I think you see that with how they resolve it in Civil Wars Part 2, that it is just some, issues from the past coming up, highlighting that yes, Aang, wasn't the perfect father, because it's always one of those situations in something like this where Aang has such an important role in the world, he was never going to be able to be, that perfect father, because he has to be, protect the whole world, and he'll have other things to do as well. But as well as that, it's just bringing up this idea that oh, you focus solely on Tenzin, but it's also it's a sense of them sort of dismissing, I suppose, the importance of Tenzin with regards to the overall world, in that yes, Aang did need to give Tenzin focused training because he's trying to bring a whole culture back. and if that meant, you know, those two maybe missing out on some trips, it's kind of that sense of like, that's sort of the sacrifices that need to be made when like such important people are involved in this, because in a way they're sort of arguing for the fact of like, you know, Tenzin maybe shouldn't have gone on these trips, then he maybe wouldn't have learned everything he needed to be at this point where he can, you know, really help the airbender culture come back. So I always interpret this as, this is just, you know, Kaya and Bumi focusing on the negatives, not to criticize that they're bringing up these issues that they actually have from the past, but kind of like we get with Lin and Sue later on, it's just this fundamental idea of like characters when they're older holding on to these events from their past and really like over kind of valuing, I suppose, what actually happened in the past, when in a way those issues helped shape them into who they are at this point in time, in that it never comes down to this situation where like Bumi and Kaya like regret what happened and wish they had taken a different path if things had gone differently. It's just more or less them bringing up that here are some things that we remember that were negative about our past. And as I said, the resolution for this in episode 4 is basically just that most of the times we're happy with our family. We didn't have issues and problems as such. They just tend to remember the times they were maybe left out of some things, and you know, that's the only thing that they tend to forget. The idea of like, you never remember or focus on the times when things just went normal and were perfectly fine. You always remember the times when something of note or something wrong happened. And I think that's kind of what's happening here for the most part, in that even after they have the big argument and kind of storm off, you can sort of sense that there's not really that big of an issue. It's just that they can't be around each other right now, but that, you know, fundamentally they need to get some little development. And as we see in episode 4, that more or less comes from just kind of learning from how, like, basically Tenzin's kids so quickly get past any issues they have, and how the adults are made to look like sort of foolish for holding on to grudges for so many years, that these are just sort of little childish sort of issues that are at play here, and they can move past them relatively easy. But I like that it's brought up in the first place, but I also would definitely make the point of saying that there's more complexities to the Katara Aang, you know, family dynamic than just Aang was a bad father, Kaya and Bumi had like terrible childhoods, and Tenzin was this kind of completely focused upon child. I definitely get the impression that that wasn't every single time. It's just, I think Kaya and Bumi not forgetting the times where maybe they had individual moments with their father, in that Tenzin's the youngest, so there was a moment when Bumi was the only child, so of course he would have got a lot of focus at that point. Kaya comes along, and it's sort of almost implied that she got a lot of focus from Katara, just being the waterbender, it naturally would happen. And then, of course, Tenzin would be the big celebrity child. It's the reason everyone, it's the one kind of child that everyone knows that Katara and Aang had. Of course, that's kind of something that gets focused upon, because the airbender kind of culture existing is because of Tenzin at this point in time, and that's an important thing to kind of have in a way. So I like the plot, but I think some people who are a bit more critical on early book 2, I think don't go deep enough with the analysis and just kind of leave it as, oh yeah, whatever they said is completely true, and not looking kind of past it and around it for like context to what exactly is happening. So that's that. The other side plot we get here is Bolin and his kind of sort of becoming abusive relationship with Eska, and how Eska is treating him, in that she's basically all for like they're going to get married, and Bolin really does not like this at this point in time. He's got himself into a real mess and doesn't know how to get out of it. Which brings up, I suppose, the whole Mako, you know, like rip off the leech kind of advice about kind of breaking up with her, which in this specific scenario, I don't have too big of a problem, because clearly Mako is giving Bolin advice about like this specific relationship, which he can see is like a problem, that like, okay, you sort of like her, but like she's treating you horribly. In this case, it's a really bad relationship. You just need to go ahead and get rid of it, and that sort of advice is sort of correct for this. It's just that they almost seem to take, like, Mako, like, in terms of the writers and Mako as a character, take the fact that he said this and, like, use this as, like, his view on relationships, like, full stop, as just, like, a thing that he does. Mako's very, like, quick to break up in relationships and causes all these problems when, I think it's just a weird angle to take with the character to, like, really present that as something that's an aspect of him, because obviously we'll get into the other breakups that are happening in just an episode or two, and we'll see where a lot of the romance, like, real issues come into play. Bole and Eska, in the grand scheme of things, isn't really a problem. It's when the Korra Mako stuff starts to come into play that the problems really come out, because even up into in this episode, you get, like, the scene of Korra being very frustrated after, you know, talking to her father and all that, and she comes over to Mako, and Mako's still like, I'm not sure exactly what sort of advice to give you, but why don't you take a break from all this? We'll go out on a date, and, you know, obviously it turns into, like, a 4-way date and so on, but still, just the fact that he actually got it right that time. He knew that she needed to take a break from it all, and he gave her the correct advice. It's like, there's a good aspect of their relationship. They're not really having, like, issues at this point, and, like, we're 3 episodes in, and we're, like, just 2 episodes away from the breakup, and it's like, where were they going with the breakup angle? But we'll get to it when the episode comes around. The main core, I suppose, of the episode is the result of what Unalaq is doing to the south. The northern troops come in, and it's pretty heavy-handed. They shut down all the ports. They're borderline getting to the point where they're doing what, like, Tarlok's task force was doing to the civilians in Republic City, to the citizens of the south, where they're just, like, using ice barriers to clear the roads and being quite kind of blunt about things. And Unalaq's kind of explanation to Korra about this is that, oh, we're protecting the spirit portal, you know, but before we kind of commit to really doing anything, and then just kind of immediately skips on to, and the next stage of the plan is that you now need to go to the north and open the northern spirit portal, and that will basically link both tribes. It'll allow travel from the north to the south in seconds instead of, like, days, basically. Now, someone in the comments for the last review kind of brought this point up about the spirit portals, of, like, okay, if Unalaq's plan is to have Korra open both portals, why does he not just do it immediately? They've opened the southern spirit portal, why don't they just go in there, you know, go past the Tree of Time, go over to the spirit portal from the spirit side for the north, and open it there? The point that I mentioned there, I don't think it's, like, a perfect solution to this, like, seeming plot hole, but is just that they would have had to have walked past Vatu. And I think just because of the whole Rava Vatu thing, you couldn't have done that at this point in time, because I think, just to a degree, I don't think Vatu could have helped himself from saying something to Rava or the Avatar, and I think there would have been some sort of, like, a clear connection made, and it would have, I think it would have, later on in the series, when, like, Rava and Vatu are eventually revealed, it would have made it look very, like, silly, I think, that, oh wait, this scene earlier on, they literally just walked around the other side of the tree as a way to avoid Vatu. It wouldn't have come across as this, like, amazing smart plan from Unalaq. It's just, like, really, you basically, your whole plot hinged on Korra walking around one side of the tree or the other. Personally, like, that's, like, one of the main reasons why I'm just kind of like, no, I get why he decided to take more of a kind of long form plan with this type of thing of, like, you know, they'll open the northern portal in the north, that way they avoid Vatu for now, because Unalaq's teaching her spiritual stuff honestly. He's just keeping some of these, like, other key things away from her, in that he obviously knows about Rava and Vatu at this point in time, but if he tells her about that, it will sort of, you know, give her knowledge that will probably force her to make different decisions than he would want her to make. So he's gonna, you know, come to that point when they actually come to it, in that he'll deal with the whole Rava Vatu thing once both portals are open, more or less. So I think Unalaq made the right choice here of just, you know, deciding to have them open the portal the way he wants to, which is actually going to the north, more or less. But I think the mistake Unalaq makes in this episode is that he thinks that he can sort of keep Korra on his side by being very respectful towards her, presenting his points very logically, and kind of helping her to understand like the changes he's trying to make in the tribe. And that Korra throughout this episode is making the point of like, we're all from the same tribe, we're trying to sort of make a united North and South, and she kind of goes along with that. The issue is that I think he makes a mistake right at the end by doing the whole, Civil War thing, and then, targeting her parents, and expecting to be able to still keep her on his side after that. And this is where I think another aspect of Unalaq's character comes into play, and that is that he's a sort of dull character in terms of his personality. But we sort of say that that's because he's very focused on the spirits. He only cares about the spirits. He actually doesn't care about humans at all, as we'll learn with the kind of core of what his plan is. We'll soon learn he doesn't actually care all that much about, the well-being of his own children and stuff like that. And I think that's shown here when he just is really, I think, makes the mistake here of just like arresting Korra's parents and expecting her to still sort of stay on his side and not just immediately turn against him, and basically use this moment as the moment that really, turns him into a villain. Of course, she sort of has to stay neutral in all of this. This is sort of the point he's trying to get towards her with this, that in this kind of conflict you have to sort of remain neutral, otherwise you are taking sides in the Civil War as well. But in doing this, he sort of, I think, misses the point of like, Korra does care about her family. As much as you've sort of manipulated her to get her to this point where she has issues with her father, issues with her mother sort of come out here, she still cares about them and isn't going to side with the person who put them in prison for no real reason. So I actually really like what they do here, in that this is Unalaq's mistake. It's just not understanding that Korra would have an emotional reaction to this, and he thought that she would just have this sort of unemotional, logical reaction to what's going on when she doesn't. And as for, I suppose her relationship with her father, we see it sort of worsen in this episode, and they show that through the scene where she gets between a group of northern soldiers and then southern people who are just defending these kids, basically, that the guards are basically about to, kind of deal out some punishment towards. And Korra gets between them because she just doesn't want any fighting to happen. I think ultimately she has to side with the South here, but she tries to remain neutral in this and not really point blame at either of them, just that at a base level we don't want fighting. We don't want whatever you two are about to do to happen. And she more or less is in control of the situation. A little girl comes in and throws a snowball at her, but it doesn't seem like she's escalating the situation. She maybe hasn't solved the situation just yet, but it's the fact that what really frustrates her here is the fact that Tonraq comes in and basically does it for her. And it's the fact that he kind of again feels the need to like bail her out of a situation. And from her perspective, like, how is she going to learn to diffuse situations without kind of resorting to violence, without actually like trying to do it herself? And I think she more or less had it in control. I don't think that situation would have turned into an out-and-out riot. I think Korra would have been able to stop it in some way. Maybe not in the exact way that Tonraq did, which is more of a situation out of respect, where he shows sides and that, like, he's basically like, the North aren't worth your time, go back to your homes, there's no need to do this. He takes a slightly different approach, but like effectively does what Korra was just about to do. And it's really shown that this frustrates Korra by the fact that he talks to Korra and she's just walked off. It's a perfect example of just like, yeah, this is the issue that she fundamentally has with you. You're still not giving her like enough respect to like allow her to do something on her own, which is what she's trying to do. She's trying to prove herself as the Avatar. And this really comes to the forefront in what I feel is probably like one of the best scenes in the episode here, which is Korra talking to her mother, Senna. And obviously, it's this group of episodes where I think Senna really kind of comes into her own as like a character, and we start to really get to know a little bit about her, kind of her personality. The voice actress for Senna gets a chance to shine a little bit here, and it's a good scene because she plays obviously the caring mother here. We haven't seen a lot of Korra's relationship with her mother, but the fact that she's in this tough position of like Tonrock's not talking to her about this issue. Korra's not really talking to her about this issue. Her family's just at odds like around her, and she's trying to get to the core of this. But I like that in this, she kind of shows her kind of side of the sort of issues that Korra is dealing with, of like her family not fully understanding the role that she's in, of just something as simple as like Senna saying, you know, the issues between the North and South have been like going on for so long, you can't hope to solve this all on your own. And more or less gets to the point where she's saying like, you don't have to be involved in this issue. And Korra just kind of goes out basically saying, I'm already involved in this as the Avatar. I have to be involved in this. This is my role as the Avatar to help resolve these issues. And it is a fundamental issue between her and her parents that they can't quite seem to just get that that's what she has to do. And they can't see that their like overprotectiveness kind of always to a degree holding her back has got her to this point where she doesn't exactly know how to resolve most of these issues and is having to learn on the fly exactly what to do in these situations. So I like that in that they have Korra have these moments of like showing that, you know, her point is valid in all of this, that it's not just a case of, as many would maybe have you believe, of just it's Korra being a pain in these episodes and not like respecting her parents. It's no, she's making this argument throughout these episodes that she's been held back all this time. And look at the dialogue from Korra towards Senna here. Like, the reason I'm frustrated in this situation is because I found out the truth about Dad, that he was banished, that he and Tenzin are the people who had me trapped here. And the way Janet Varney kind of reads this line, the way she says the word trapped, the fact that she uses the word trapped, is very telling towards how much, how impactful that moment is to her. That's not just me making up this kind of excuse for why Korra is the way she is. This scene is Korra directly telling you that she interprets her training as her being trapped there. Her saying that her entire kind of goal has always been from a young age to be the Avatar, and she was held back from becoming the Avatar in the way every other Avatar, apart from Aang, became the Avatar. But even Aang, just by the craziness of his situation, was able to travel the world. She's the first Avatar to ever be like held back and sort of like guarded over during her training, and because of that she doesn't have this sort of street smarts, the kind of experience with the rest of the world to be like fully equipped to handle the situations that she has to deal with here, and is doing her best to do everything possible. And I like that kind of in a way at this point Senna doesn't really have like a response to that. Tonrock, similarly, like the previous episodes, like not understanding that she has to be involved in the spiritual matters in terms of the relationship between humans and the spirits. That's both of her parents in this situation where, you know, this is why she's sort of, you know, acting out against them here, is that she wants to show that she could do this stuff on her own. And it obviously comes to a head with the big action scene of this episode, which is that Unalaq is, you know, taken by, you know, southern rebels, and what happens, of course, is that she thinks the person who's leading this is her father because it's this big guy, and she pursues them. Really, really good action scene. I really like this because it's some pretty skilled waterbenders, and she has to fight them while not hurting them, so she doesn't really use her bending all that much. I think she only really uses one bit of airbending, and just, I think in general, airbending to be as acrobatic as she is in the fight, and just takes them down effectively just like hand-to-hand combat when they're bending at her, and it shows how skilled she is. And it's a really good animated fight scene as well, because like you have the the use of like fabric and stuff like that, the rope as well to tie people up without kind of just smashing them against walls, it works really nicely there. And eventually you get the reveal when she stops the guy who's headed off with Unalaq, and it's not her father. And it's this big moment of just like, okay, this has kind of gone too far. The fact that it's got to this point where I honestly thought my father was capable of becoming the leader of like a southern like rebellion, almost like terrorist organization against the North. The fact that I even thought that shows that I need to have a talk with my parents. And I like that Korra had that moment of like, it doesn't like take away her actual issues with her parents, but it's just that I need to talk to them about this, and we need to sort of figure this out and just like have a heart-to-heart type moment, which is, for me, it's the best moment of the episode, is the scene that Tonraq and Senna have with Korra at the end. Just the fact that she can tell that like she's kind of unsure when she kind of walks into the house, like, you know, you could tell she's quite emotional, and then she just bursts into tears. She apologizes to her father, but I like how they do it, and they kind of justify a lot of what I've been talking about with this scene of just both of them admitting that, yeah, we have held you back. Tonraq literally saying it, like, I'm sorry I held you back, and giving her a little bit more respect kind of here going forward. Similarly with Senna, I think explaining their perspective a little bit more, of just being the parents of the Avatar, like, it's not something we, like, planned. When me and your father found each other, we just wanted to, you know, have a nice, quiet life together after all of the issues that, like, your father had but everything changed when we found out that you were the Avatar. And her explaining that they always knew that, like, one day they would have to sort of let Korra go to be the Avatar. But you can sort of tell that what's not spoken here is both of them sort of saying that they weren't fully willing to accept that that moment had effectively come at this point in time. But Korra countering them by saying, like, you're my parents, like, I'll always, like, need you, I'll always, like, need your help and advice. But obviously the point that she's been making here is that you also need to let me do stuff on my own and respect that I am the Avatar, and I have the skills to do what's needed. And I think they get to a point here where, like, they've fixed these issues that she's having with her parents in this moment of just her understanding their perspective more, her just, I suppose, easing their kind of fears of, like, you're not just gonna, like, lose me in all of this. I'll always kind of need you and come back to you, but that she needs them to let her to be the Avatar. Respect her decisions, allow her to make decisions, and not make those decisions for her. In that, I think it worked very well because it was a more even scene, but it was a scene that kind of acknowledged Korra's feelings about what was going on here. So I think it was actually like a really well executed, like, character scene between Korra and her parents, where kind of all sides admitted fault in this, but that, I think for me, the core of it was that Korra's parents needed to admit that, you know, it came from a position of them caring about her, but it ended up having this sort of negative impact on what's happening right now. That it's not just Korra being a pain, they've sort of caused the situation that led to kind of Korra being in this situation at this point in time. But it's obviously immediately ruined by Unalaq coming in and having them arrested, and they're going to be put on trial. And I think just the fact that he says this, and just earlier on in the episode, it seems like it's this sort of turning point again for Unalaq, where, like, you're almost at the end of last episode thinking he's a villain because of what he's doing, because of what the North is doing in this episode. And then when he makes that moment of just like, okay, I've just been kidnapped, I have every, like, justification to have these, you know, Southern rebels thrown in jail, including Varric. And then Korra basically says, no, that will cause the war. Have them stand trial, be fair, let them argue their point, and have them actually have a chance in all of this. It will show a sense of fairness from the North towards the South, and it will help things going forward. I liked that Unalaq, like, basically said it, you know, I respect the Avatar's wishes on this matter. It's just that later on he uses those wishes to put Tonrock and Senna on trial because Korra had actually told him earlier on in the episode that the meeting of the rebels basically had happened in her house. And then it's a very small aspect of the plot here, but it is present, and that's that Varrick is the one primarily inciting this, like, the Southern Rebellion, basically. He's the one, like, really leaning in towards, like, maybe we should fight back. Whereas I actually really like the reveal that Tonrock, who is the warrior, he's the one who's actually like, no, we don't need a war between the tribes. As much as I dislike my brother, I'd never, like, fight him or go at him in that way or try to kidnap him. We have our issues, but it's not that bad. Varrick is the one who's kind of very much like, yeah, he wants a war and is getting everyone kind of amped up like this. And the fact that Unalaq is kind of like, capture Varrick, basically, kind of shows that, like, he's aware that Varrick is someone who's like a bad influence on the South, because in the earlier episodes you can see sort of Unalaq staring at Varrick because Varrick is sort of ignoring his speeches, and it's this kind of minor rivalry that ends up happening sort of in this season. It's not too important, but like the movers obviously are like propaganda pieces against Unalaq in the north. And you can sort of see a bit of a rivalry developing, and it's just the fact that Varrick is not spiritual at all. He's basically part of the reason for why the South is kind of sort of anti-spiritual. It's more kind of business and kind of technology now, which is a complete counter to the way Unalaq actually wants things to be. So it's a subtle one, but we'll begin to see Varrick come into play a little bit more as we go forward. But as I said, there's a lot of complex sort of character moments in this episode that I really like when you look into things a little deeper. I really like the initial exploration in part 1 of Tenzin and his siblings. I really like Korra and her parents in this episode. I think those couple of scenes are very, very well done. You know, I think this is the episode that really helps to get like some solid development between Korra and her parents out. Especially Senna kind of getting a bit of a spotlight in this episode. It works really well for me to act as the real explanation episode for why Korra is so frustrated throughout these episodes. But yeah, I think that's the review for this episode. So in the comments, let me know what your thoughts are on the episode. But yeah, thanks for watching, and bye.